I live in Manhattan, Kansas. I'm on staff with Bridges at Kansas State University. About probably 8 years ago, I got interested in the idea of mediation. So mediation is a practice where if there are two people or two groups of people in a conflict, sometimes they go to a mediator to help them solve their arguments. A mediator is different from like an arbitrator or different from somebody who comes up with the solutions, because mediators help people to come to their own solutions, which we feel they're much more likely to keep if they do that. So I've had some experience in mediating a few divorces. So of course, if a couple divorces, there's things like children they have to decide on who's going to take care of them, when and where and how. And then there's also, I did some adolescent parent mediation. So the teenage years can often be troublesome and difficult. And so mediators often help parents and their teenage sons or daughters come to a workable way to live together. So I think conflict is kind of interesting. Of course, no one likes to experience it personally, and I'm no exception. I don't like conflict, but I think the ways people solve conflict can be really, really interesting. And if we study it and look at it a little bit, we find that it helps us in our own personal lives. So I know that cultures from around the world have different ways of solving problems. I have a son in the Ukraine. He's a volunteer with the Peace Corps, and he was telling me about how they solve conflicts in the Ukraine, which is very different from the United States. And he was telling me he couldn't get any water in his apartment. And it went on and on and on. And so finally he went to the director of the school, and he said, well, I had to yell, because that's the only way people listen to you, is if you get angry and give me the water and stuff like that. And it's against my son's nature. His name is David. He's just not that kind of a person. But they yelled at him and blamed him for, I don't know, not having water. And then he left. He thought, oh, that was useless. But the next day, he had water. So, so there are lots of different ways people solve conflicts. But it's important to know how we do it in the United States. And I do have one other illustration of that. So there was a student at Kansas State University. He's from a Middle Eastern country. He was having a problem in his academic department. He began to follow people around to get the problem solved. And then he would yell and he would get upset at them. And of course, in the United States, with recent events, they found it very threatening, and they actually dismissed him from the university. He's no longer allowed on the campus, even though it was his own cultural way to solve problems. So it's important to know how to approach conflict in the United States and what works and what you should avoid at all costs. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about conflict in 3 areas and then give you just a simple outline of how to go about it. And I'm going to call on some of you to help me out a little bit. So I've divided the conflict into 3 areas, and let me write that down. So we have conflict in, whoops, with my thing. There we go. We can have conflicts in home. We can have conflicts at work. And we have conflicts in our organizations. So we're not going to do anything really extremely difficult or complicated today, but I'd like you to help me out a little bit and volunteer. What are some of the simple conflicts you see that happen in our homes and families? Just shout it out, and I'm going to just make a list. It's not a right or wrong list. It's just conflicts that you see that often happen in homes.
Noise.
Noise, okay. What's that?
Cleaning.
Cleaning, yes. Sleeping.
Children's education.
Okay, children's education. Well, I think I missed one. Money. Anything else?
Computer games.
Computer games, okay. Now that list did not take very long at all, and we could probably go on and on. How about work? Some of you are out of school, some of you have some work experience. How about some of the difficulties you've seen within your work? Communications. Promotion. I heard a salary. Organization, yep. Okay. Ethics can.
You're asked to compromise. You're like, no.
Okay. That may be something like if you're asked to lie about something or. Attitudes? Okay. Wow, that did not take long either. One of the common ones I hear is somebody works hard and somebody does not work hard. And then the person that doesn't work hard, they don't seem to care. The person that works hard is concerned about their reputation. They feel like they don't know what to do. Should I do their job too so I don't look so bad? Yeah. Okay, organizations are a little different. It could be very similar to what you find in the workplace, but organizations could be like volunteer organizations. Typically we think of like church would be an organization, or Bridges is an organization, or there, what would be another example? Like I have a friend who is on in an organization to try to raise money for the McCain Theater, stuff like that. Okay, help me out. What would be some organizational conflicts people could run into? What's that? Opinions, yes. What's important, what's not important? How to do things, how not to do things.
The arrangement of the responsibilities.
Okay. Okay, anything else?
Core values.
Core values, good. Funding. This is a great group already. You have so many good experiences and things to offer. Anything else you'd like to add anywhere before we go on to the next steps?
Organization,
Leadership.
leadership.
Politics. Yeah, that could go along with fairness, stuff like that. Good. All right, well, what I have today is I have a handout for you. And first of all, I'd like you to look at the back side of it. So you want to pass some on this side of the room and just one of these on each side of the room. So you'll notice when you get your paper, you'll see a diagram on the back. Have any of you ever experienced these diagrams? Okay, so when you look at the diagram, what do you see?
Like a vase.
You see a vase, or I heard another answer. Two faces. Why do you think I use this diagram when it comes to resolving conflict? Exactly. So when you come to a conflict or a problem, sometimes we think there's one way, mainly our own way, that's right. But actually there's more than one way to look at a problem and to get it solved. You'll also know right above it is intensity of feelings chart. Are we out of papers? I'm out. Yeah. Okay, so is there something for everybody to look at now? Okay. See, you exceeded my expectations. I thought maybe 10 people would come, so I'm really happy you're here. So above this is the intensity of feeling chart. And when we come to conflict, we like to think it's not about our feelings, but it really is all about our feelings. And so to help us work through conflict, it's really important to know and to be able to put a name to our feelings. So you'll see 5 basic feelings, and I got this off of a psychologist's page in the internet. So we have happy, sad, angry, afraid, and ashamed right across the top. So then there's levels of happiness. For example, there's elated, excited. The medium would be cheerful. Up, why do we use up for happy? Yeah, yes, it could be your face up. I don't know. But if someone says, I'm up, that means they're fairly happy. Glad and pleased. So let's look at the column of sad. And we'll just start at the top down, and we'll read it all together so we're familiar with these words. We have depressed, hopeless, heartbroken, down, unhappy, and blue. Okay, so you know some people sing the blues. That's sad, sad kind of melancholy or sad. Okay, angry, let's read from the top down. Furious, enraged, upset, mad, annoyed, irritated. And under afraid we have terrified, panicky, scared, frightened, nervous, anxious, under ashamed we have sorrowful, remorseful, apologetic, guilty, embarrassed, and disappointed. So you can see there's a difference between being disappointed and being sorrowful. Disappointment is just light. Sorrowful, you might be sorrowful for a few weeks, actually. So you can see there's a difference in the intensity. And down at the bottom, I like to point out right away, I've read a lot of books about conflict resolution and making peace. These are the absolute 2 best books, I think, on the market. The first one is called Difficult Conversations. It was by a mediation group from Harvard University, and it's written in a way that is easy to comprehend and easy to understand with lots of illustrations. I think it's a great book. The other one is, you might be surprised that I put this here, but it's the wisdom in this book goes beyond children. It's called How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Your Kids Will Talk. So has anybody heard that book or read that book? That's a fantastic book. And what's so good about it is they'll show you by illustration, like by little cartoon illustrations of helpful ways to word things and non-helpful, unproductive ways to word things. And that's what we're going to be really all about today. So if you'll turn it over, your paper, you'll notice there's 2 verses on the top. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." And Peter, the apostle of Jesus, said, "Seek peace and pursue it." So peacemaking is a worthy endeavor. It's better than avoiding, and it's better than making conflict worse. All right, then you'll see steps to solve arguments. You'll see that this is not terribly difficult. I'm just going to read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we're going to do some exercises together to get the idea. So the steps to solve arguments. Number 1, let the other person know you need to talk. Number 2, listen to the other person's perspective or point of view. Number 3, tell your own perspective without attacking the other person. Number 4, apologize when you have hurt someone, whether you intended to hurt them or not. At any point, if you feel yourself getting out of control emotionally, ask for a break to cool off. And number 6, ask for help to find a solution. In other words, you're finding a solution that satisfies both of you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take a conflict, like I'm going to pick out the one about cleaning. Now, I read a famous author who is writing about forgiveness, and he said, don't work on trying to solve and to forgive really big offenses. Just start with small ones like your children or your husband or your wife. So we're going to start small, but I think you'll see the wisdom of this is that it applies to almost every area of life. So I'm going to take cleaning. And the reason why I'm taking that is because I hear this complaint over and over and over again about roommates mainly, or husbands or wives who never pick up after themselves. So does it bother the person who never picks up? No, it only bothers us who like it neat. Okay, so what do you do about a problem like that? So what I'm going to do is we're going to start with number 1. Let the other person know you need to talk. And the goal of that, you'll see, is to begin a conversation without causing the other person to become defensive or walking away. So I'm going to read a negative example. That means I'm going to read an example that would make the other person get angry at you or not want to talk to you. And I'd like you to take your feelings chart, and when I read it, if you would just tell me how that makes you feel. Okay. So I'm going to say, my name is Jane, and I am reacting against Mary, who's my roommate. I'm making this up, but I really am Jane. I'm making this up, but I'm going to react against Mary, who never does the dishes. She leaves her dirty dishes stack up for a week and expects everybody else to pick up after her, right? So I'm very frustrated with Mary, and this is what I'm going to say to her. Your dirty dishes are piled so high, I cannot even see the sink. This mess is disgusting. Now, if you were Mary, how would you feel? Mad? Anything else? Upset? Okay. All right. Here's another. Now, this is a way you should not act, but it helps us because sometimes I think all of us slip into these kinds of talking. If you don't clean up your mess, I'm going to move out. And your reaction?
Heartbroken.
Okay. Okay, here's another one. I don't think you really care about anybody but yourself. If you did, you would not leave this kind of mess for me to clean up. What? Heartbroken, it could be. You might have really hurt their feelings. You never do your share of the work. You always leave it for me. How would that make you feel if I said that to you? Enraged. Okay. Now, we're going to restate what I want to talk about, but in a different way. And again, check your emotional reaction. It looks like you're having a hard time keeping up with your dirty dishes. It looks like you're having a hard time keeping up with your dirty dishes. Embarrassed? Okay. Annoyed? Okay. But is it,
In a way you want to help them.
in a way you kind of want to help them, but you want to address the problem. Are you heartbroken? Are you enraged? Disappointed? Okay. So you might be those things, but you're the lower intensity. You might be willing to talk about it if someone said that to you. Okay. Here's another one. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by the mess in the bathroom. Guilty, embarrassed. Okay. Do you think you might want to talk to somebody if they said that to you? Or would you just turn away in anger? You might be willing to talk if someone said that. I've been thinking about our household management. When would be a good time to talk about it? Nervous? Okay, good. All right, those are fine. You'll notice that the first sentences I said, I used the word you. And I said, you never, you always, you should. And anytime you use the word you when you're trying to solve a problem with someone, you're going to get a negative reaction. They're going to react because you're attacking them. If you express what you're feeling, I feel this. I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm thinking about this. They're much more likely to come to the table and talk to you about it than if you start out with a you. Okay, so that's the goal, to begin a conversation without causing the other person to become defensive. All right, number 2 is, oh, and may I see your paper for just a half a second? Okay. Oh yeah, so this is the one I used for number 1. I need to talk about the situation in the kitchen. When would be a good time to talk about it? So that's another I need, not you never.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Could you tell me the first one again? The first one.
The first example,
Yes,
the
yes.
positive example?
The best.
Oh, the best.
Yes.
Okay, so one technique is to say what you see. So it looks like you're having a hard time keeping up with the dishes in the kitchen. And sometimes it can get even simpler than that. If it's let's say somebody's using the bathroom and they continually leave the toothpaste out and it makes a mess. So sometimes if you've already addressed this problem, all you need to do is say one word, like toothpaste, and they get the message. So it's not, you want to start out just sometimes saying what you need. I see your socks in the middle of the floor. And a lot of times we feel like we know they intended to hurt us or to make something difficult for us. But if you really want to solve a problem, it's better not to know what they intend. So intentions are different from the effect they have on you. So somebody could be leaving out their socks in the middle of the floor, leaving their dishes piled high. They're not intending to hurt you by it. It's just kind of their way of life. But you can feel like, oh, maybe they're intending to annoy me. See? So it's important to separate intent from impact. What person does has an impact on you is different than what they probably intended. So it's better to go into a conflict with a curiosity, like, I wonder why that person isn't cleaning up after themselves in the kitchen, or maybe something's going on. So in other words, you have to take the first step to listen to their side of the story. So a negative example would be if someone's telling you about why they're not cleaning up, you would say, no, 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 that's not what happened. So interrupting is a really rude thing. And so if you're listening to another person, don't interrupt them. Listen carefully. Another thing is if people start telling you something and you think, you might just say something like, well, that was dumb, or why'd you do that? That was a stupid thing to do. Again, what's going to happen to that person? How are they going to feel if you call them dumb? They don't want to talk with you anymore. So you've ended, you'll never get down to point 6 if you end it too soon like that. Okay. A positive example would be to say, it sounds like you're saying ... after they say it. Or if they're telling you why they behaved the way they did or why they didn't clean up the dishes, you could say something like, I'm not sure I follow you. Can you tell me more about that? So it gives a person another chance to, gives you the chance to understand what's going on and why. Another thing is people behave a certain way and there's usually an underlying cause for the way they behave. And sometimes it's helpful to point that out. So you're worried about whatever it is. Or to notice their emotional reaction. You seem pretty upset about this. And let them, again, have their time to say it out. Sometimes if you get into a conflict and you can say, well, I think I understand. Is there anything else you can tell me to help me understand? So it takes a lot of patience to do this because we're usually so intent on telling them why we're bothered and why we're upset and how they're wrong that it takes a lot of patience to step back and say, wait a minute, okay, help me understand what's going on here. And I think can I see your page again? Thanks. So on your page it says, can you help me to understand your perspective? That's the second step. Any questions about that before we go on? Yes.
This is I learned from my advisor. That he usually spoke words very straightforward, not do any sugarcoating. So, and then I know that, and he told me he's doing this word because if he uses a mild strategy, he often finds others won't follow his words, and most of the time we just keep on with doing what we have been doing. And this mild strategy seems like just does not work.
It's too mild. This would be more on the equals level, though. If your advisor is telling students something, he's giving them advice. So sometimes if you're in that position above another person, yeah, it's better just to say what you need to say. But you can say it in a kind way, but directly, yes.
Yeah, not only just like an advisor, employer-employee relationship, but also like in a roommates. I think it also happens like it.
Okay, so she's saying, are you saying that this might be a little too, they might not understand what you're trying to say?
I mean, sometimes like we use a mild strategy and sometimes find it's just that's not working.
Yes, and sometimes that happens. So, but I still think the first 2 points are helpful, is to begin to understand. Then yes, I agree, you can be a little more straightforward as time goes on. So the goal for number 2 is to understand their perspective. You will need to be humbly curious as to what's going on with the other person. Don't assume you know what they intended. Give up the desire to blame. Blame will stop the progress altogether. So the minute you say it's your fault, or this wouldn't have happened had you not done X, Y, Z, then the conversation ends, because none of us like to be blamed for something we feel is not our fault. So just remember 3 things about this number 2. Listen to the other person, make sure you understand. Don't assume you know what they intended. And 3, give up the desire to blame. It will shut the conversation down. Later on, there might come to be a time where there's apologies, but not, probably in stage 2, not yet. Okay, if you've listened to the other person well, then you can begin to tell your own perspective. So your own perspective is your side of the story. And sometimes you can preface this like, okay, I think I understand what you're saying. Now, can I tell you what I'm thinking? And you ask permission. And by that time, usually if they've had their say, they're calmer and they're willing to listen. Here would be a bad way to start out. I don't think you really care about our house or how I feel. You act like I'm not even there. How would a person feel? Angry. Anything else? Enraged. Okay. I don't know why you can't be more like Alice. They never treat their roommate like this. And what do you think? How would you feel? Jealous. Enraged. So comparisons never help. And I know parents are great at comparisons. Sometimes we compare one child against another. Why can't you be more like so-and-so? And you know, that's not really, if you've had that done to you, you know that's not a productive way to motivate you. You never want to become like the person they think you should be like, right? So it's not a very good way to start out. A positive response would be, I feel so angry when the dishes are stacked everywhere. I work, and you could go on, and you should go on to explain yourself. I work hard all day, and when I come back, the dishes are there, and I just feel like it's one more thing. I am embarrassed when our house is messy. I feel repulsed to use a bathroom that has not been cleaned. So your goal is to express your side of the story. You're not blaming the other person. You're not telling them what they should do. You aren't telling them what they should have done. You're just telling your side of the story and how it makes you feel. Not what you think about the other person, only about how it makes you feel. That's why it's so important to be keyed in on these emotions. I was looking at I saw this article in Leadership in Forbes magazine, and it was pretty interesting because some of the keys of good leadership had to do with emotional intelligence, being able to read how another person feels or thinks and responding in an appropriate way to do that. So this is probably a little more important than some of us would like it to be. The goal is to express your side of the story, your feelings only. So there are basically two ways we come to conflicts. One is we avoid them. I know plenty of people who do this. Well, I'll just wait and pretty soon that roommate will move out and then I'll be okay. And the other way is to attack the person. Not physically, but don't do that. But maybe by our words and our actions, maybe we give them we call it the cold shoulder. We don't talk to them. We're so angry at them, we just don't want anything to do with them. And neither of those are really productive. They're really counterproductive. You'll never learn to solve arguments well if you're always avoiding and if you never seek to resolve anything. Okay, number 4, apologize when you've hurt someone, even unintentionally. And here again I said there's a difference between intention and impact. I'm sorry I forgot your birthday. I should not have been so preoccupied with work. Would be an example of an apology. Do not excuse what you have done. In other words, oh, I've been so busy at work lately, I just haven't done the dishes. That's an excuse. And people don't want the excuse. They want to know that you are sorry for kind of infringing on them, and they want to know that you're going to try to change. So don't give an excuse. Oh, we're so good at that. In fact, we do it all the time in our own minds. We excuse what we do in our own mind. Oh, they shouldn't be mad at me because I've had this much to do, or I'm so stressed out by my parents, or whatever it is. Don't excuse yourself. People don't want to hear your excuse. They just want to know your apology. Yeah.
So how do you differentiate between like an excuse or a legitimate reason?
You know, sometimes there are legitimate reasons but the person you're in conflict with, they don't want to hear your legitimate reasons at first. They might be willing to listen to them if you apologize and make some effort to change. Then you can say, I'm sorry, I just got so far behind in work, but I'm really sorry I did this to you, and I'll try to change. Now that would be a little better. But the other really bad way of giving an excuse is kind of subtly blaming the other person at the same time. Oh, I would have done my dishes, but you had the sink filled up with your pots and pans. That's not acceptable. So we're really good at kind of blaming other people when we're actually apologizing, so be really careful about that. Why do you think it's important to apologize when it's your fault? Well, it says to restore trust and honesty with the other person. So, you know, people know if you're hiding something. I read a story about a guy. He was a survivor of the Holocaust in World War II. And when he came, he eventually settled in the United States. He married, he had children. But when he walked on the beach, he never took off his shoes and socks. So his son was so annoyed at him, like, Dad, we're on a beach, take off your shoes and socks. He would not do it. And the son knew, there's kind of an emotional connection between people. He knew that there was something going on that was deeper than just, why don't you take off your shoes and socks? And finally, after years, it came out why he didn't do that. And it was because when he entered the concentration camp, they had everybody remove their shoes and socks. So if you're at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., I heard that story, and when I went there was a bin like that, and it was filled with shoes. And I thought, okay, that's why. So sometimes there's an emotional thing that's going on behind people. It's not even spoken, and maybe the person isn't even willing to tell it, but you know that there's something going on. So be as honest and kind as you can be in apologies. Okay, number 5 is flooding. So flooding is the feeling that when you can't think clearly. It usually happens in an argument or a discussion. And probably we've all seen children who flood, only we call it they have a temper tantrum. And so children will fall on the floor and they might yell and slam the door and scream and kick. So they're flooding. They're so distraught emotionally, they cannot think logically and rationally. But the interesting thing is that that happens to adults too. Now think about it. The last time you were in a heated argument with someone, how many times did you say something you regretted or wish you didn't say? You don't have to raise your hand, but I know I have. Or I've done something, or I've said, usually it's say something that I shouldn't have said that. That was too mean. That was going too far. And that's what happens when you flood. If you feel like that, and the more you practice this, you'll get smart at recognizing your own feelings. Or if someone is flooding at you, in other words, if someone's yelling at you and getting really angry and intense at you, the natural response is to respond back in the same way of saying things and doing things that you regret. The smart thing to do is take a break. So you can say something like, I need to take a 5-minute break. And leave. Even if the person follows after you and continues yelling, you can do that. You can go outside, you can take a walk, you can go to another room in the house, you can do the dishes. Just give yourself a little time to calm down. And when you come back to it, the other person will probably be a little more calm themselves. Like I've had disagreements with my husband. And I'll say, I can't talk about this now. And he'll know that's my sign. I'm getting too upset, too distraught to talk about it. And sometimes we take a day, and he'll come back and he'll say, are you ready to talk about it? And I said, okay, now I am, because it's given me time to calm down and think a little more clearly about what we're disagreeing about. So it's important. Do what you need to do to calm down. And finally, number 6, and then we're going to do some practices at our tables, is ask for help to find a solution. Something you both agree on. And that's going to take understanding what the other person wants. So when you get to this point, you could say, okay, so what are your suggestions to solve this problem? Sometimes you can make a list, or sometimes you can just listen to each other. This works actually really well with children, if any of you have children. Is there's a problem, maybe they want to go to someplace and you don't want to take them, and then it's a very easy thing to do. Okay, so we disagree about this, what can we do to solve this problem? They'll probably have suggestions and you'll have suggestions, and you look at them and you negotiate. You find something that you can both agree on. And so the goal of that is to find an area of agreement that will allow you to move forward in your relationship. So like cleaning, it could be something simple like you figure out a cleaning schedule, or maybe you trade jobs around the house. Maybe one person doesn't like the bathroom, but another person will do the kitchen. Or I don't know, there's tons of things. And it's amazing what the other person will think of. You think you have all the answers, and I think I have all the answers, but the other person usually has something really smart they've been thinking about that could work. So those are the 6 steps. So I'd like you, could you two join this table over here? And then I think the rest of you are fine. What I'd like you to do is pick out 2 people who will do a role play. The rest of you are going to be, make sure they follow these steps. Now, I should caution you about the steps. In life, in real life, sometimes they don't always follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But for practice sake, we're going to do that so we can just see how it goes. Okay, so you'll want to pick a simple problem, and then pick out 2 people who are going to argue, one take one side, one take the other. And the rest of you, it's your job to make sure that they speak appropriately and follow the steps. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a minute, and if your tables would discuss what problem you want to do, then I'm going to write it on the board. At the end, we will find out your solution. So this isn't real long and involved, but just kind of a start of what you want to do. So take a minute and just find a problem. You can pick anything up here.